Okay, good morning. So, in the previous class, we came to know about different components or elements which we categorized as active or passive elements, right? And uh, some of the components we discussed, we came to know about different electronic components. So in this class, by the end of this session, you will be able to describe the term conduction in solids and metals. You'll be able to explain the doping of semiconductor, what do you mean by that and all. And you will be able to define diffusion. So, um, so if resistors are the most basic passive component in electrical or electronic circuits, then we have to consider this diode, the device which we will be studying now in module 1, diode as the most basic active component. Okay. However, unlike a resistor, a diode does not behave linearly with respect to the applied voltage, as it has an exponential VI characteristics, and therefore cannot be described simply by using Ohm's law as we do for resistors. Okay, so yesterday we just had a simple introduction that diodes are basic unidirectional semiconductor device that will allow current to flow through them in only one direction, that is whenever it is forward bias. So in coming classes, we will understand more about what is biasing, what is forward biasing and all. But before we have a look at how these diodes work, we first need to understand the semiconductor's basic construction and concept. So as I mentioned, diodes are made of, it is a single piece of semiconductor material which has a positive P region at one end and negative N region at the other. Okay, so that's why we call it as PN junction. Diode is also called as PN junction. It is nothing but a fusion of two materials, P-type material and N-type material, which has a resistivity value somewhere between that of a conductor and insulator. So when we talk about semiconductor material, firstly, let us look at what makes something a conductor or an insulator. Let us understand when we say semiconductor materials lies between conductor or insulator, let us understand what does it mean. Okay, in simple language, we have already studied like conductors are those materials, say metals, yeah, where electric current can flow easily, isn't it? Where current can flow freely. So the degree to which a specified material conducts electricity is nothing but conductivity, right? So opposite of that is resistivity. So in order to understand different materials, let us understand with respect to resistivity. So the electrical resistance of an electrical or electronic component or any device can be generally defined as the ratio of voltage difference across it to the current flowing through it. That is a simple basic Ohm's law, right? V is equal to IR. So R, the resistance, what we are talking about, is nothing but a ratio of voltage and current. Someone wants to join. Yes. Okay. Okay. If at all there is any problem, please unmute yourself and speak up. As I'm going through the slides, I'll not be able to see the chat, or if there is any hand being raised, I'll not be able to see that. Okay. If you want to say something, you unmute yourself and speak. Okay. So yeah, we were talking about the resistance, and as you can see here, the problem with using resistance as a measurement, whether to define a material, whether it is falling into category of conductor, insulator, or in between. So the problem is, say, the resistance, it depends mainly on the physical size of the material, right? And also on the type of the material it is made of. Do you agree with that? For example, say if we increase the length of the material, making it longer, the resistance will increase, right? Proportionally increase. Similarly, if we increase the diameter or size of the material, its resistance value would decrease, as shown in the relation there, right? Resistance is equal to rho L by A, right? It is directly proportional to the length and inversely proportional to area. Okay, so it becomes quite difficult to actually talk only about resistance. Okay, and we also know that the resistivity it is given by rho here, as you can see in the relation, where it is measured in terms of the units is ohms meter, right? Ohms meters. So if the resistivity of the various materials is compared, then they can be classified into three different categories, say conductors, insulators, and semiconductors. All these are just basics. I'm just refreshing you so that we will get some proper foundation to proceed with our actual discussion. Okay. Now observe this resistivity chart. Based on the resistivity, which is plotted there in y-axis, ohm meters, yeah, the value of resistivity, the materials can be categorized into conductors, semiconductors, and insulators. Notice that there is very small margin between the resistivity of conductors such as silver and gold compared to a much larger margin for resistivity of the insulators between glass and quartz, right? So this difference in resistivity is due in part to their ambient temperature, as metals are much better conductors of heat than the insulators, right? So if you observe from this resistivity chart, so we can say that the conductors are the materials that have very low values of resistivity, usually in the micro ohms per meter. This low value allows them to easily pass an electrical current due to plenty of free electrons floating about within their basic atom structure. Okay, but these electrons will only flow through a conductor if there is something to spur or encourage their movement, encourage the movement of electrons, right? So the something here is the electrical voltage. So what we are trying to say, if a voltage or electrical voltage is applied, then there is a flow of current. That is what we are trying to say. So what actually happens here when a positive voltage is applied to the material, these free electrons leave their parent atom and travel together through the material, forming an electron drift, which we call it as current, right? Commonly known as current. So how freely these electrons can move through a conductor depends on how easily they can break free from their constituent atoms when a voltage is applied. So then the amount of electrons that flow depends on the amount of resistivity of that particular conductor, right? So we know that the examples of good conductors are, say, copper, aluminium, silver, because they have free electrons in their outer valence shell or ring, resulting in them being easily knocked out of the atom's orbit. So which will allow, in other words, to say that it allows the current to flow through, right? So coming to insulators. Insulators, on the other hand, are the exact opposite of conductors. We are already familiar. They are made of materials, generally non-metals, that have very few or no free electrons floating about within their basic atom structure, because the electrons in the outer valence shell are strongly attracted by the positively charged inner nucleus, right? So in other words, the electrons are stuck to the parent atom and they cannot move around freely. So if a potential voltage is applied to such materials, that is insulators, no current will flow as there are no free electrons available to move, which will make these material as insulating materials. So insulators, we are very familiar. They have very high resistance, millions of ohms per meter, and are generally not affected by normal temperature changes, right? Although we know that say at very high temperature wood becomes charcoal, where charcoal is a conductor, right? So excluding such examples. So if you have to name or give the example for insulators, as it is shown here on the slide, you can name marble, fused quartz, or PVC plastics, or rubbers, all come under, or glass, all come under insulators, examples of insulators. So insulators play a very important role within electrical and electronic circuits, because without them, electrical circuits would be incomplete, isn't it? That's why this figure is put up there. Look at the cable there. Inside the cable, you have the conducting material, say the copper wire. But to say for avoiding or reducing the external noise, the insulating material, that is the plastic, is covered over the cable. So insulators are also important in electronic systems. So coming to basics of semiconductors. So semiconductor materials such as silicon, germanium, and gallium arsenide have electrical properties somewhere in between, as I mentioned, between conductor and an insulator. They are not good conductors nor good insulators. They are semi in between conductors and insulators. They have very few electrons because their atoms are closely grouped together in a crystalline pattern called crystal lattice. But electrons are still able to flow, but only under special conditions. Okay, so the ability of semiconductor to conduct electricity can be greatly improved by replacing or adding certain donor or acceptor atoms to this crystalline structure, thereby producing more free electrons than holes, or vice versa. That is by adding a different amount or percentage of impurities to the pure semiconductor materials. Here the common or popular semiconductor materials, we are aware that it is silicon and germanium, or germanium, right? So if we add impurities, we can make these semiconductors act like a conductor, right? So on their own, we say the silicon or germanium are the intrinsic semiconductors, right? What do we mean by that? That means they are chemically pure, containing nothing but semiconductive material, right? But by controlling the amount of impurities that can be added to these intrinsic semiconductor material, it is possible to control its conductivity. That is what I meant. Okay. So the various impurities called donors or acceptors can be added to these intrinsic material to produce free electrons or holes, respectively. Now observe here, the process of adding donor or acceptor atoms to the semiconductor atoms is called doping, right? So as the doped silicon is no longer pure, these donor or acceptor atoms are collectively referred as impurities. That's what I mentioned earlier when we add impurities, okay? So by doping these silicon material, that is intrinsic semiconductor material, with sufficient number of impurities, we can turn it into, say, N-type or P-type semiconductor material. All right. So the figure what you can see here is the structure and lattice of a normal pure crystal of silicon. Now observe here, silicon has 4 valence electrons in its outermost shell, which it shares with its neighboring silicon atoms to form full orbital of 8 electrons, right? The structure of this bond between 2 silicon atoms is such that each atom shares one electron with its neighbor, making the bond very stable. And that bonding, we call it as covalent bonding, right? So as there are very few free electrons available to move around the silicon crystal, the crystals of the pure silicon or even the germanium are therefore good insulators, because see, because of the covalent bonding there are no free electrons to move, right? So in a normal condition, the silicon or the germanium semiconductor material acts as good insulators. So silicon atoms are arranged in a definite symmetrical pattern as shown here in a crystalline solid structure. This crystal of pure silica, what you can observe here, is an intrinsic crystal and therefore has no free electrons. But simply by connecting a silicon crystal to a battery will not be we will not say there can be any current flowing through it, right? Because there are no free electrons to move. So to do that, to allow the current to flow through that, we have to add some impurities. So we have to create a situation where there are different poles, say positive or negative poles within the silicon material, by adding impurities, so that there will be more free electrons or say more holes, so that there is a flow of current. Now tell me, what do you mean by flow of current? Can anyone answer here? What do you exactly mean by flow of current?
It is nothing but the movement of an electron in a crystal lattice.
Exactly. Very good, Ashwija. Yes, very good. So as we had observed here in the figure, say if there is any possibility that there is a free electron to move, so the electron will jump from one atom to another, right? So electron will be jumping to one atom to another, creating again a hole in the previous atom, right? So as the electron is moving, there is again uh, a movement of holes in the opposite direction, right? So that is what we call it as conventional current. The movement of holes is nothing but conventional current, right? Which is opposite to the direction of the flow of electrons. Okay, so this point has to be made clear. Are we good at this stage? Are you with me? Do you find me going fast? As these things are already you've studied, I'm just going fast because I just want you to refresh things. Are we good?
I'm that conventional current is only formed when there is a presence of doping, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. No, I just wanted to break this monotonous one-way communication. So I just put that question. Yes, that is what we'll be continuing the discussion now. Okay? Okay. Now, quickly answer this question. Enter the answer in your chat box. Okay. So within a few seconds, how many of you answer? Let me see. I hope I'm not fast. Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, you should be aware that we will have such questions in between. Okay, yeah, stop. Fine. So we'll proceed with doping these semiconductors, or what do we mean by doped semiconductors? Okay. So first, let us consider N-type semiconductor basics here. In order for a silicon crystal to conduct electricity, we need to introduce an impurity atom such as arsenic, antimony, or phosphorus into crystalline structure, making it extrinsic. So extrinsic semiconductor means which is impure in nature. That means there is some impurity added to the intrinsic semiconductor. Okay. So if at all we are adding arsenic, antimony, or phosphorus, all right. So these atoms, the arsenic, antimony, or phosphorus, these atoms have 5 outer electrons in their outermost orbit to share with neighboring atoms and are commonly called pentavalent impurities. So this allows 4 out of 5 orbital electrons to bond with the neighboring silicon atom, leaving 1 electron free or to become mobile when an electrical voltage is applied, right? So this free electron will be free to move. As each impurity atom donates 1 electron, pentavalent atoms generally known as donors, okay? So antimony as well as phosphorus are frequently used as a pentavalent additive to silicon. So antimony has 51 electron, as you can see here, arranged in 5 shells around its nucleus, with the outermost orbital having 5 electrons. The resulting semiconductor basic material has an excess of current-carrying electron, each with a negative charge, and is therefore referred to as N-type material, with the electrons called majority carriers, while resulting holes are called minority carriers. When stimulated by an external power, the electrons freed from the silicon atom by this stimulation are quickly replaced by free electrons available from the doped antimony atoms. But this action still leaves an extra electron, right, floating around the doped crystal, making it negatively charged. Then a semiconductor material is called as N-type when its donor density is greater than its accepted density. In other words, it has more electrons than holes, thereby creating negative pole, as shown here. Coming to P-type semiconductor basics, again, assuming that you know all these things, I'm just refreshing things. So if we go the other way and introduce trivalent impurity into the crystalline structure or structure, so let us say trivalent means such as aluminum, boron, or indium, which have only 3 valence electrons available in their outermost orbital. The 4th close bond cannot be formed, as you can observe here. Therefore, a complete connection is not possible, giving the semiconductor material an abundance of positively charged carriers known as holes in the structure of the crystal, where electrons are effectively missing. So as there is a now hole in the silicon crystal, a neighboring electron is attracted to it, will try to move into the hole to fill it, right? However, the electron filling the hole leaves another hole behind as it moves, right? So this in turn attracts another electron, which creates another hole behind, and so forth, giving the appearance that the holes are moving in the opposite direction of the movement of the electron, right? So this movement of holes result in a shortage of electrons in the silicon, turning the entire doped crystal into positive pole. As each impurity atom generates a hole, trivalent impurities are generally known as acceptors, as they are continually accepting extra free electrons, right? So the diagram, what you can see here is the structure and lattice of the acceptor impurity atom boron. Okay, boron is commonly used trivalent additive as it has 5 electrons arranged in the 3 electrons, arranged in 3 shells around its nucleus, with outermost orbital having only 3 electrons. The doping of boron atom causes conduction to conduct mainly to positively charged resulting p-type material, right? So in p-type material, as we know, we say holes are the majority carriers, while the free electrons are called the minority carriers. So the semiconductor is now called p-type when its acceptor density is greater than the donor density. Therefore, p-type semiconductor has more holes than the electrons. Now, quickly answer this question. Okay, you're giving the numbers. Okay. Someone has left already. Okay. Who is that? All are wrong. May I know who is this Mr. WAO? Okay. Yeah, there seems to be some mischievous things happening. Okay. Yeah. We'll deal with that later. Fine. So to summarize, N-type are materials which have pentavalent impurity atoms added and conduct by electron movement and are therefore called N-type semiconductor materials. So in N-type semiconductor materials, we know that the donors are positively charged. There are large number of free electrons, a small number of holes in relation to large number of free electrons. That's the meaning. So doping gives positively charged donors and negatively charged free electrons, right? And supply of energy gives negatively charged free electrons and positively charged holes. That is an N-type, okay? In P-type, these are the materials which have trivalent impurity atoms, right? We also call it as acceptors and conduct by hole movement and therefore called P-type semiconductor materials, right? So in P-type materials, the acceptors are negatively charged. There are large number of holes. That means for a small number of free electrons, there is a large number of holes there, comparison. And doping gives negatively charged acceptors, positively charged holes, whereas when supplied with energy, it gives positively charged holes and negatively charged free electrons. Okay. So one thing we have to remember that both P and N-type as a whole are electrically neutral on their own. Okay. So let us continue now. So a pure semiconductor crystal or a germanium crystal, as we know, in a pure state, is an or is a intrinsic semiconductor, right? And there are no free electrons and holes in intrinsic semiconductor to produce a usable current. Okay, so the electrical action of these can be modified by doping means, that is adding impurity atoms to a crystal to increase either the number of holes in them or number of free electrons in them, right? That is what we have discussed till now. So when a crystal, say silicon crystal or a germanium crystal, has been doped, then it is called as extrinsic semiconductor. And there are two types. That is what we have understood till now. So N-type semiconductor, it has free electrons as majority charge carriers, and p-type semiconductor having free holes as majority charge carriers. So observe here, by themselves, these doped materials, say n-type material or the p-type material, are of little use. Okay. However, if a junction is formed, okay, junction is formed by adding or bringing both the p-type and n-type material together, a useful device is produced, which we call it as diode. All right. So by fusing or bringing together n-type and p-type material together, forming a junction, a device which is formed is a diode. So you know that there are two terminals there. The terminal towards n-type material is called anode, and the terminal towards p-type, and terminal towards n-type material is called cathode. And the symbol of the diode is shown like this because of the direction of the current, which will be in only one direction. So current will flow from anode to cathode always. So that's why this arrow indicating the unidirection of the current in the device called diode, right? So now, how is it possible that properly joining two semiconductor materials, each of which by itself is freely can conduct the current in any direction, refuses to allow current in one direction? Are you getting my point? So we said that if in a extrinsic semiconductor material, say in p-type, the majority are holes, and in n-type, majority are electrons, right? So on individually, if we see, there are majority charge carriers which can allow current to flow through them, right? But when they're fused together, they actually block the current. There is no free movement of charge carriers happening. So what exactly happens here? So when a junction is formed, the following process takes place, which we call it as diffusion. What is diffusion? We know that all particles, they move in random motion, right? Because of their thermal energy, all particles move from a region of high concentration to region of low concentration, right? Through any semi-permeable membrane or even in a solution without any help. So that is a basic physics which we know. So because of this diffusion process, when both the materials, p-type and n-type materials, are brought together, so here holes from the p side diffuse into n side, where they recombine with the free electrons. Free electrons from the n side diffuse into p side, where they recombine with the free holes. So the diffusion of electrons and holes is due to the fact that large number of electrons are concentrated in one area and large number of holes are concentrated in another area, right? So when these holes and electrons begin to diffuse across the junction, then they collide with each other, and negative charge in the electrons cancels the positive charge of the hole, and both will lose their charges. So what do we mean by here? So when the electrons are moving towards the p region, okay, they cancel the positive charge of the hole there, and the holes that move towards the n region, they cancel the negative charge of the electrons this side. So this diffusion of holes and electrons in an electric current is referred to as recombination current, right? So this recombination process decay exponentially with both time and distance. That means what? It is maximum at the junction. Is anyone trying to say? Yeah, Aidan D'Souza, are you able to see the slides? Anything? You wanted to stop me? Yeah. Please, if you have any doubt. Okay, was it by mistake? Fine, fine. Okay. So, oh yeah, So that's what I was saying. The diffusion of holes and electrons, that is when the recombination process, what we were talking about, it exponentially decreases with respect to time and distance. So what does it mean? At the junction, it will the recombination process will be maximum, right? So most of the recombination occurs just after the junction is made and near the junction. So the impurity atoms are fixed in their individual places, isn't it? So p-type is fixed here, the atoms in the p-type is fixed here, and the atoms in the n-type is fixed here. The atom itself is a part of the crystal and so cannot move, right? But the electrons and the holes meet, their individual charges are cancelled. This leaves the originating impurity atom with a net charge. That is, atom that produce the electron now lack an electron, and so becomes positively charged, whereas the atom that produce hole now lacks a positive charge and becomes negative. So at the junction, as a result, you can see negatively charged ions in the positive region and positively charged ions in the negative region. I hope you are able to get me. Okay. The electrically charged atoms are now called ions. Okay. These are called ions. They are no longer neutral. These ions produce electric field. So after several collision, okay, after continuous recombination and too many collisions happening and cancelling of charges happening and accumulation of these ions taking place, the electric field is great enough to repel the rest of the majority carriers away from the junction. So what do I mean here? If an electron is trying to diffuse from, say, N region to P region, okay, it is repelled by the negatively charged ions deposited at the P side. I hope you are able to get me. So this diffusion process will continue, and there is a say blocking of further movement of or the diffusion of the charges across the junction. Okay, so because of this accumulation of the ions at N and P region, there is some potential developed. Okay, so this region now surrounding the junction has no majority carriers. So majority carriers have been now repelled away from the junction. So the junction is said to be like depleted from carriers, right? So the junction is called now the barrier region or the depletion region, all right? And the electric field, what we are talking about, the field that is developed is called space charge potential, or also called barrier potential, or also referred to as cutting voltage or knee voltage. All right. So physically, the width of this depletion region depends on the doping level. If the material is highly doped, then the depletion region is physically thin, because diffusion charge needs more space to travel, isn't it? So the depletion region will be, the width of the depletion region will be very less when the material is highly doped. If the material is lightly doped, then the depletion width of the depletion region will be wide. Okay, so typically we know that the silicon has the barrier potential of, can anyone tell here? What is the barrier potential of silicon material? You have already studied in PU, I guess. So the barrier potential, what I was discussing and talking till now, that develops across the junction because of the accumulation of immobile ions here. So in silicon type of material, it is 0.7 volts, and in germanium type, it is 0.3 volts. Okay. So now what we discussed here is now when the PN junction or the diode is not biased, at say in unbiased condition, right? So even in that condition, there is a small potential that can be measured across the terminals of the diode. Now, if you want to make this device conduct, then it means that we have to apply the voltage that will be more than this barrier potential. That means what, in a simple language to say, you have to apply potential that can break this barrier potential, right? Or say it should be more than this barrier potential. Only then the device will be able to remove this barrier junction and start conducting. That means allowing the charges to freely move across it. Okay, so that will be the continuation in the next class. I hope you are with me till here. If you have any doubts, let me know. Okay, answer this question, the last question here. Jason, Kate, Annalisa, Ashwija, Vivian D'Souza, Edita. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, thank you. Please let me know if you find me to be very fast, because it was all repetition which you had already studied. And since this was required for the continuation of the topics and to brush up your memory, refresh your memory, we had to discuss these topics. So I went quite fast. Okay, let me note down these things. If you have any doubt, please let me know. We'll have some discussion here at this point. Is it okay? Am I understandable? You're able to follow me?
Ma'am, why is that the germanium has less cut-off voltage than silicon?
Yeah, it is because of the material, right? As I
And isn't the
mentioned,
size of germanium larger than the silicon?
uh, uh,
Then, like, it should be more, right?
what do you mean by size?
And the atomic size.
Okay, so